Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Development Control. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note this meeting is being webcast live on the internet, and if everybody could switch their mobile phones off or to silent, and that includes me. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I would like to explain who everyone is. My name is Councillor Nick Robinson and I'm Chairman of this committee. To my right are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications on this evening's agenda. To my immediate right and left are officers who will be presenting the applications and providing advice to the committee. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee, not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, examining the evidence brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and keep points made to the application to material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. May I ask all committees members to avoid repetition and keep any comments on each planning application to a maximum of 4 minutes. We've got 9 items on the agenda this evening and I hope we'll do it in under 3 hours. Thank you. Right. Apologies for absence and substitutions. I've not been informed of any, so no. Declarations of interest? No. Urgent matters? I have nothing. No. Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of July 2022. I move that they are accurate. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Frost. And I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Okay, application number 1, which is land adjacent to Chancellor's Barn, Walton Hill, Newbury. And if the officer could introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Erection of a 2-bedroom dwelling with a new vehicular access off Trade Street with 2 car parking spaces and private amenity space. I would like to draw your attention to the update paper and in particular in relation to the application site viewing report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And if we could have our first speaker, and that's Councillor Simon Bowden. Good evening, Councillor Bowden. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and you've already found the microphone, sir.
Thank you. The Parish Council have carefully considered this application. Firstly, 3 points of order. The applicant refers to a retired borough councillor. This reference should be ignored as it has no bearing or influence on this application. All Parish Council Planning Committee members have viewed the site from the parish field. The AONB cannot comment on every application and their guidance is clearly published for the planning team to apply. The Parish Council's considerations are as follows. This application must be viewed in the context of a rural village. Trade Street is a semi-rural character. The houses are set back from the road behind boundary hedges. The properties sit within large plots with generous gaps between buildings, offering a sense of spaciousness. To one side of the site is the parish field, gifted to the parish and maintained as a simple open countryside area. It is not part of the applicant's site. The application represents urbanisation of the countryside that the emerging neighbourhood plan and local plan seek to avoid. Building in the garden of the existing 4-bedroom house will leave the existing property with almost no usable garden. The applicant references guidelines regarding garden size. However, Basingstoke's design and sustainability document clarifies that building in this way is unacceptable. Basingstoke's document confirms that garages, bins, car parking areas are excluded from amenity space calculations. Guidance on the size of back gardens for houses are minimum areas. The size of a garden would depend on the character of any development and its surrounding area. In lowly densely populated areas, dominated by landscaping and substantial gaps between houses, gardens are larger than the minimum sizes may be required. The size of any amenity space should be appropriate to the character of the dwelling. Larger dwellings, such as 4-bedroom detached houses, will require gardens considerably in excess of the minimum sizes. The thin triangular shape of this plot is not big enough for an additional building. It is simply too tight. Indeed, the design and sustainability document references the need for the character of rural settlements to be maintained and enhanced by ensuring that any new development responds positively to distinctive local characteristics. The proposal does not meet that requirement. In relation to the turntable for parking, despite the internal turntable facility not being required for the proposed dwelling and not bringing about a highways objection, the Highways Authority comment that car turntables are generally not acceptable as a replacement for sufficient turning area, as there are potential maintenance issues and no guarantee that the turntable will actually be used. The need for a turntable clearly shows that this plot is too small. Any visitors to either house will need to park on the street opposite a busy doctor's surgery, already suffering significant parking challenges. Basingstoke rightly declined permission to build 2 houses on a plot 4 homes away, and the planning officer has drawn your attention to this in her report. The permission to build a single bungalow on that much bigger plot was also declined by the same planning officer, who cited adverse effect on visual amenities and lack of integration with the surrounding area within the context of an AOAB. She referred to Basingstoke and Dean's local plan, the National Planning Policy Framework, and the Design and Sustainability Supplementary Planning Document. We accept that each application must be assessed on its own merits, and that these reasons for refusal are actually given more applicable in this case. In summary, our key issues for this application are: it's out of keeping with the rural AOMB location, its height is overbearing, viewed from both the parish field or the roadside, it is being shoehorned into a plot that will add no value to the street scene, but will appear too dense and out of keeping. It is 1 metre from the boundary with the parish field. In this locality, this is clearly cramming and overbearing. The residential amenity of the existing house will be severely compromised by the addition of another property in its garden, and parking for both homes will be compromised. The turntable fails to address this. This is an application based on overdevelopment of the plot, with an adverse effect on visual amenities and the lack of integration with the surrounding area of an AOMB. The Parish Council requests that this application is refused.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that the height of the building would be overbearing, but during the viewing panel we had a question from one of the members about whether it would, the new house would be any higher than the existing property, and we were assured it wouldn't be. So can you try and square that circle for me?
And where the house will be and how tight it is to the boundaries of the property, the height of the property infringes very closely to the boundaries as opposed to being in a larger plot set back, so the height is more clear to people passing the property, whether it be in the field or on the roadway out the front. So it would look out of context.
Any other questions? No. I've got one. Could you, Trade Street, which this proposal is on, what sort of is the traffic load on Trade Street? Is it a busy road? Is it a light load? Can you give us a little bit of an insight into that?
It's a fairly busy street for a village of this kind, mainly because it houses the doctor's surgery, which is a busy surgery open all week. The traffic through flow is fairly heavy in both directions, and parking is quite constrained during the surgery opening at times. That includes doctors and staff that aren't able to park in their own surgery parking to enable patients to be able to park in their car park. So it gets quite congested at times. It's also been part of our parish speed awareness campaign, and it's highlighted some issues with speed in the area too.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you, Councillor Bowden. And if we could have Mr. Winchcombe, please. Good evening, Mr. Winchcombe. You have 4 minutes. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and you've already found the microphone. Good.
Mitigation. Informatives 2 of Case Officer's Trebash report confirms that in accord with paragraph 38 of NPPF, the Council have worked in a positive and creative manner with me, the applicant. I agree. By 1, proactively offering pre-application advice. Section 5 addendum of the completed application form confirms the advice given by a then in-post senior officer. 2, by seeking further information, and 3, by seeking amendments such as footprint reduction. Discussions with the case officer, Bethan Wallington, resulted in an agreed reduction in overall length of 2.3 metres, nearly 20%. This is a huge reduction by any standard. And roof height reduction. Roof impact was initially minimised by using hipped ends, and Case Officer Ruth Trebash continued reduction in volume by attaining my agreement to lower the ridge of the roof. I consider that both the case officers were firm but fair, and I would not seek any other way of dealing with matters. The Parish Council gave their final comments on the 5th of April 22. I submitted a rebuttal to this document. It was on the website on the 9th of April. No doubt members are familiar with its contents. I wish to update a few points. The mitigation items to which I've referred above have not been addressed by the parish in any way. 2, none of the parish councillors have visited the site since the mitigation items were agreed. The panel who visited the site on Friday last will have a much better understanding of the layout and the extent of the site. 3, Case Officer Trebash has reported that both site and Chancellor's Bar will meet the extent of garden required by the BDBC policies. The car turntable and drive satisfy the access and parking requirements of HCC highways and BDC parking SPG. There are no road parking facilities allocated for the surgery. There are no parking restrictions on Trade Street. Parish references to street gaps are not based on fact. Street gaps for the proposed dwelling are the largest of all on the east side of the public highway. The emerging neighbourhood plan has suffered a setback in that an error was discovered by the independent examiner and remedial input was required. Previous consultations have to be repeated. This being the case, the neighbourhood plan still carries very little weight. AONB. Much has been made of the importance of protecting the AONB. I wholly agree, and I'm sure that officers of the AONB have the appropriate authority to do so. Although they were twice invited by the borough to comment on the application, they have not. Their silence speaks volumes in that they have made no objection. If they had any, then no doubt they would have said so. They have had some 16 months to do it. I commend the application for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Winchcombe? No, I've got a couple myself. Your loft space has got 2 very large Velux windows shown in it. How is that loft space accessed? Is it accessed by a proper staircase or is it accessed by a loft ladder? Could you do the microphone, please?
It's called, what's it called? It's neither one or the other. It's in between the two. It's almost vertical, but it's a ladder which doesn't meet the building regs as a stair. It's got bigger pieces one side and then you walk on like that. Okay. Does that make it clear? Sorry, I'm vague.
Thank you. One mutes the other out. So, and second question, you've obviously gone to an awful lot of trouble with this turntable, and if you park on that turntable and you then have visitors, how are your visitors going to turn their car around, or are they going to have to reverse out onto Trade Street?
You use the turntable to do it. You use the parking availability for the two, turn it round a bit, and then one can move across. The visitor can come in then and use the turntable, and one of the internal cars, if you like, can park on the drive, and another one can park on the drive as well. But the parking requirements for a two-bedroom house in the parking SPG say 2 parking spaces only.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much. Officers, I'd just like to know, there was an emerging local plan that was mentioned, or neighbourhood plan that was mentioned. I'd like to know how much weight can we give to it. Thank you.
Chairman, the report refers to the Eastwood Hay neighbourhood plan, which is still in the process of being prepared, and it's still going through examination. I know that extensive works have taken place, but there is currently a delay following an independent examination for the plan to take into consideration addressing of the protection of the natural nature sites, the nitrates issue. So because of that, there is a delay in the neighbourhood plan preparation, and because of that, the neighbourhood plan is not at that stage where it carries sufficient weight or enough weight for officers to recommend refusal based on the policies within that plan. Thank you.
Any more questions for officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification, please. We've got under other matters, it discusses that an existing hedge was removed, and we have a fence that would require planning permission as it doesn't comply with permitted development. First part of the question is, what's wrong with it, please?
The fence requires planning permission because of its height. There's nothing wrong with it. It just exceeds the criteria for permitted development.
And that would be what height?
I'm sorry?
So what height would we allow in permitted development?
This will be part of a separate planning application, and once the proposal is submitted, obviously it will be assessed and considered. The fence is not part of this planning application.
My second part is, because the hedge has gone and there is a fence now in place, if we were to be faced with an application for a fence that was then refused, the sight lines of the hedge that may have to be put back in if there was any enforcement, would that then compromise the highways comment, because they've worked on their displays of a fence that hasn't got planning permission? So you can see where I'm coming from, is how much of an impact should we consider the fact that the fence is theoretically not supposed to be there?
So under permitted development rights, in that location, a fence could be erected up to 1 meter in height. So potentially that would already have some impact on the visibility displays from a car, obviously depending on the size of the car and the height of the driver. But at this stage, we haven't got the details of the fence, and like I say, it's not part of consideration of this planning application.
Thank you. It could be a metre high fence, so it's a matter of a height thing, not a visibility thing. Thank you.
Any more questions for the officers? No? In that case, debate. Councillor My brain's gone. Rattigan, thank you. Brain dead.
Thank you, Chair, for remembering who I was. I think it is a difficult decision that we've got in front of us, if I'm honest, because in the main, I welcome small dwellings in rural areas. It's not a 5-bedroomed home. And in the main, that is what small rural communities are looking for. And I can say that with some justification. Of course, I was chair of governors for Wooten Hill Junior School for a number of years, so I know the area very well. But I do feel there is a loss of amenity in a large 4-bedroomed house. And would we be approving a 4-bedroomed house with such a small amenity space if it was in front of us tonight? And I don't feel we would be. Would there be an overbearing effect on the open space that is used by the public? I think there probably is. I'm not convinced, if I'm honest, that the turntable works without shoehorning it in there, or shoehorning friends and family coming in to visit, or the residents who may well have two cars, as there is very few public transport options within Wooten Hill. So I have to say, I cannot, in all good conscience, support the recommendation for approval as it stands at the moment. I might hear from my colleagues that I can be persuaded, but at the moment I do not feel that I can go with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. Anybody else wish to go? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up where Councillor Rattigan's left off, I think the shape of the site presents the awkwardness in the context of your argument, Ken, because if you look at the other development site, or the other sites in the location plan, when you take the overall volume of it, it probably equals a few of those other plots, but the shape of the plot gives the sense that it's much smaller and is crammed on the site in exactly the context in which you set. The bit about the turntable, I agree with. I think the turntable is a concern, but there's been precedent set historically where this committee has given permission to turntables as an innovative solution, as Hampshire Highways have used as language in the past. So it's, I guess, a point about the sight lines. How safe is it to exit that junction point that's being created with the fence at the height it's at? And again, we're left with Hampshire Highways saying it isn't. So I get the arguments and I've got a lot of sympathy for it. But again, I'm wondering what's going to stand up to scrutiny beyond this application and the officer's recommendation in front of us. And I think the officer's judgment on this one's right. But I respect the point being made.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Anyone else wish to contribute? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. Having viewed what is quite a peculiar little site, I personally am uncomfortable about the application, but I don't think there's any concrete reason for refusal, so I'm happy to move to approve based on the officer's recommendations.
Been moved for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bowes. Okay. I will chuck my 5 pence in before we go to the vote. I'm coming down on the same side as Councillor Rattigan. I think it's overdevelopment of the site. I think it's too cramped. I think it leaves insufficient amenity space around the properties, and I think it's out of keeping with the street scene. So personally, I will be voting against it. However, it's been moved and seconded for approval. So those in favour of approval? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 each way, so it comes down to the casting vote, and I've already voted against it, so the casting vote will go that way as well. So that is refused. Sorry. In that case, apparently, we need another proposal to refuse it, in which case I will propose refusal for the reasons I've given, seconded by Councillor Rattigan. Those in favour of refusal? And I take a guess it'll be 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 5. 6. Thank you. Those in favour of refusal, please put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against refusal, which will also be 6. And once again, it comes down to the chairman's casting vote, which goes the same way. So the application is refused. Aletta, if you could confirm the reasons. I think you're happy with the reasons. Yeah. Could you confirm the recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman. So the reasons to refuse will be based on overdevelopment of the site, cramped development, not in keeping with the area, and impact on amenity of the main property of the existing dwelling. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the change of use of a ground floor unit to mixed use class A1, A3 and A5 to allow for hot food takeaway, and also the installation of a duct to the west and south elevations and various internal alterations. If I draw your attention to the update paper and the slight rewording of the first reason for refusal, deleting the word borough, and the officer's recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
If we could have our speakers, which is Mr. Finn and Mr. Lusty. Thank you. If you could confirm your name when you start, you have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button is in front of you.
That's wrong, sorry. Mr. Finn is not here. I'm Mr. Lasty, yes. Right. The planning approval of the initial approval was 77187 for Unit 1 and 2, was for A1 and A3 use only. It was stipulated the opening hours should be Monday to Saturday, 7 till 1900 hours. Reason stated, protect the amenities of the occupiers of nearby property. Nothing's changed from this view and the impact of the residents above. The hours granted to the co-op are not comparable as they do not have residents above. A5 use now requires full planning permission, not change of use. The units were not constructed for A5 use. The EHT relies heavily on flawed noise and vibration reports and have failed to assess the implications. It's a Volkswagen syndrome. If it's wrong, we fix it later. Fixing with a larger motor will increase noise and vibration. The noise and vibration report is based on estimates and supposition as to how the building could have been constructed or materials used. In this instance, the noise and vibration levels stated cannot be relied upon to be accurate or valid. If you do not know the depth and the thickness of the walls and floors, you cannot determine the accurate noise and vibration levels. Confining the extraction motor and ducting to a confined space will increase its impact to the building. The extraction duct exits approximately 12 to 19 inches below our balcony, and no noise levels have been provided at this point. The ducting extends for 2 meters away from us and then turns through 3 times 90-degree bends before returning towards our balcony. Airflow will be restricted because of these bends and noise level increases. Again, no noise assessment has been published as it passes our balcony. The ducting will pass just above head height and only 12 inches away. Why is a silencer situated on the vertical portion of after our balcony if the noise level is not high? EHT have agreed with the report that Appendix B, it has a noise level of 33 decibels and is within guidelines. But this measurement is from the balcony on the 2nd floor, which is 3 meters away. And our balcony is on the 1st floor, which is closer to the source, and no measurements have been provided. I don't know why this location has been chosen. Is it to make sure the noise is within the 35 decibels that the council council guidelines. The report states that at 3 metres, the sound reduction will be 10 decibels because of the distance from the sound. At 30 centimetres or 12 inches, it would only be 1 decibel. So the report indicates a level of 42 decibels on our balcony. This is higher than the background level and considerably higher than the council's noise assessment guidance of 35. God. EHT had not implemented an airflow summary based on what the acoustic report says. It assumed that EHT had relied on the equipment company, RMG, and they are based in Leeds. Basingstoke Fishy Delicacy is registered in Leeds as well. And Mr. Farhat Akay owns 75% of the shares of both companies, so they cannot be deemed as independent. If you walk around Park Road, you find a consistent visual outlook. There's no external ducting as is proposed, so it'll be totally out of keeping. And because of the close proximity to our property, the ducting will be obtrusive and have an unacceptable impact both from an amenity, visual and noise point of view. Noise levels will be higher than the background noise and higher than the council's recommended level. EHT has failed to address the odours that arise from the windows and door entrances. These will directly impact our windows and we will not have clean, fresh air from the fumes from the fish and chip shop.
If you turn your microphone off, thank you. Questions for the speaker? Councillor Gaskell, thank you.
So this is a retail unit. Could you tell me what it was before this application?
Since it's been built, it's been vacant. But it was deemed to be A1, A3 use.
Any more questions? Councillor Harvey.
I'm opposed to the noise and the vibration that will affect our property. I'm opposed to the fumes that will come from the shop because we have no fresh air. Day like this, you need windows open and we're going to be assailed by the smell of fish and chips. It's not acceptable.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you very much. Questions to officers? No. Councillor Gaskell.
So when this building was it built with a takeaway or food establishment at the bottom of it?
So it's already got a consent for an A1, A3 use, so that would be retail, or you could have a sandwich shop, so it's more cold food takeaway that could have gone in there.
Yeah, it's just my concern with the smells. I mean, if it's not been designed for being a fish and chip shop or something like that, then there's issues, smells coming up through the building, potential fire. There's probably other things which haven't been designed into the building. So I just wanted to know what would we do about that?
This seems to be more of a statement than a question. Could you ask your question, please?
So would we have to do something, or would we have to impose something as part of this planning application?
I mean, our recommendation is for refusal anyway, the officer's recommendation. If you were to approve it, then all the ducting that's gone in, if, for example, there was an issue with odour, that the filters, for example, in the duct have to be replaced, and that's something that they will deal with under their legislation, under statutory nuisance there.
Any more questions for the officers? In that case, debate. Councillor Harvey.
If you go through the report, you have a significant number of letters of objection and you have a significant number of letters of support. And there's that balancing act between the impact I think that's going to be on existing residents and neighbours and then the wider benefit that reflects across the community that want this unit filled. They actually want something active going on in this unit rather than it being left vacant and empty. And I think the context of the smell and the purpose for which the design of the unit was for A1 to A3 as completely different to a design that would be appropriate for A5 is the crux of the matter. So I think if the applicant genuinely wants this, they need to go away and think far harder than they have done thus far about how to make it acceptable if they genuinely want this business to get off the ground. But presented with what presented with, I can't see how the refusal isn't a good argument. So I would move the recommendation as for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much, Chair. I read the papers with interest and agree with Councillor Harvey that it was interesting to see the number of objections and also the number of supporters. And while, you know, I don't like seeing empty retail spaces, I have to agree with Councillor Harvey, and I'll be happy to second the motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded for refusal as per the officer's recommendation. I think go straight to the vote on this. Those in favour of refusal? I think that's everybody. Thank you. That application is refused. If you could confirm.
Thank you, Chair. The application is refused for the 2 reasons on the officer's report paper.
Item number 3, land at Monk Sherborne Road, Charter Alley. Letta, if you could introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is a technical detail consent application for the erection of 8 dwellings with associated access, parking, landscaping and private amenity space. And this application follows an application for permission in principle, which was allowed on appeal, and that application was for up to 9 dwellings. And because that application was already allowed on appeal, the technical detail consent is for the details of layout, design, access, impact on residential amenities, etc. But the principle of development has been established through the permission in principle application. I would like to also draw your attention to the update paper and in relation to the application side viewing report, also changes to the reasons for approval, which now incorporate reference to the neighbourhood plan. There is additional condition in respect of levels and 1 more objection letter that was received after the officer's report was published. And the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Arletta. If we could have our first speakers, which is Mr. Palmer, Ms. Gibson and Mrs. Barton, please. Thank you. If you could confirm which of the 3 you are, and you will have 4 minutes. I will remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button is in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Helen Barton. I'm speaking on behalf of the other 2 as well. You've now visited the site in Charter Alley, inspected the hedge and discovered that the proposed access point would be located at the narrowest part of Monk Sherborne Road. You will have also noticed that the traffic speeds do not conform to the data that you have all put your name to. I know that the traffic surveys sadly have been accepted and the results not queried. But we as objectors will never accept those findings because the surveys have produced clear and disturbing anomalies that have been blamed on the equipment. Ladies and gentlemen, have any of you looked closely at the tables of results for the speed data, or have you had to take instructions from a higher authority? May I ask if each one of you understands why there are 3 sets of data, identical dates, identical speed groupings, and yet the figures are totally different and are rather conveniently lower each time. I don't understand why, and nobody will explain them to me. It is not okay to turn a blind eye. At least I can say my conscience is clear because I have done my level best to find accountability. As the speeds determine the splays, the measurements can no longer be accurate for that narrow part of the road. The data, because it was captured in a non-neutral month, took no account of significant extra traffic, i.e. school runs and the daily rat runs, despite being deemed acceptable by Hampshire County Council. Why? Let me turn to a hedgerow that is well over 50 years old and plays an important part in shielding houses and occupants from noise and pollution. Not one of the houses on Monk Sherborne Road has to face another house. The houses do have space for off-road parking, not as a luxury, but as a necessity, because it is too dangerous to leave cars on the road. The road is too narrow in its entire length to support building on both sides, yet, at its narrowest point outside our house, it has been deemed acceptable to consolidate housing yards from a blind and fast bend, a private car park area, and a busy T-junction. The hedge also soaks up the carbon dioxide from the traffic using the road, so is playing its small part in slowing global warming as dictated by government. Has the council yet received a written request for the hedge to be removed? The retention of the hedge was always part of the original PIP, so why is the developer so keen to rip out a section of it, apart from the fact that it benefits him? And how big is that section going to be? The ingress-egress road width would be 5 metres. To fit the splays would necessitate another 5 metres being removed. That would almost certainly not give contractors enough room to manoeuvre their lorries, equipment and supplies into the field. So even more would be nibbled away bit by bit.
We have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. What is wrong with the entrance through San Martin Close? Why has there been no mention of it? There is a perfectly good, ready-made, safe way in that meets all the objections. We are not NIMBYs because we support development in the right places. There is simply no identified need for housing in this hamlet. A huge amount of time and money was spent preparing the neighbourhood plan to conform to council and indeed government requirements, to identify suitable building sites locally, only to be totally ignored when an interesting development proposal comes along. This strategy would leave neighbours unable to use parts of their own homes for fear of being accused of staring into people's windows and gardens, and that cannot be right. Please may I urge you to review all the options on this proposed development and to be clear in your own minds that you have made the right decisions for the inhabitants of Charter Alley who have to live with them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I would just like to emphasise something that our letter said, that the principle of putting 8 houses on this plot was taken out of our hands at appeal. So we're not discussing whether these houses should be built. That's already been decided. It's whether this is the right development, the right layout, the right type of house, and the right access. So, questions for the speaker? No? Okay, I have one, which is just showing me. Do you know, by any chance, is San Martin Close an adopted road, or is it a private road? Was it adopted by the council when it was built?
Ask Mrs. Gibson, who actually lives there, if I might.
Yeah,
I think it was adopted by Sovereign Housing Association.
Adopted by Sovereign Housing Association.
okay, thank you. That answers my question. Good evening, Mr. Pettit. You have 4 minutes. I will remind you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Mark Pettit and I work for Fowlers. We prepared and submitted this planning application on behalf of the applicants, Thornacre Land Limited. The application is recommended for approval, and we fully support this recommendation. Members will have read the committee report, which is both comprehensive and robust, and sets out clearly why technical details consent should be granted in this instance, in line with the development plan and the NPPF. As you will have seen at last week's site visit, the application site is a natural and logical location for a small residential development, a view that was supported by an appeal inspector in March last year, when permission in principle was granted for between 4 and 9 dwellings on the site. So we know the site is suitable for residential development. It's now a case of whether this current scheme is acceptable in design terms and ticks all the necessary boxes from a technical point of view. We believe that it does, and the planning officer shares this view. As you will see at pages 129 and 130 of the committee report, a number of changes have been made to the scheme during the course of the application. Indeed, we've worked positively with the case officer over the space of some 13 months to get the scheme in a position whereby all of the technical consultees are happy and raise no objection. This has included reducing the scheme down to 8 dwellings from 9, changing the layout and amending the design and detailing of the houses. We now have a proposal that has attracted no objection from Thames Water, Landscape, Biodiversity, Urban Design, Environmental Health and the Tree Officer. The same is true for Hampshire County Council Highways, who are satisfied with the proposed access out onto Monk Sherborne Road. Visibility displays of 2.4 metres by 43 are in line with the speed limit through the settlement and the results of the speed survey that was undertaken, and only a small section of the roadside hedgerow needs to be removed to facilitate this. The previous appeal inspector was happy with this, noting that even if the rural frontage onto Monk Sherborne Road was eroded through the removal of mature vegetation, this would not be out of keeping with existing development fronting this part of the road. In terms of design, we feel that the proposals respond successfully to the constraints of the site and will fit in well with other properties in this part of Charter Alley. The development will promote the use of vernacular building styles, traditional materials, and a site layout which reflects the character, appearance, and local distinctiveness of Charter Alley and the surrounding area. The proposed houses will make a positive contribution to the area and add to the variety of properties in Charter Alley. Indeed, the proposed development incorporates a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, including a bungalow, a pair of semi-detached dwellings and a house that would be built to accessible and adaptable standards. The applicants are happy to accept all the suggested conditions set out in the committee report, including those relating to materials, architectural detailing, landscaping, biodiversity enhancement, lighting, tree protection, electric vehicle charging points and water efficiency. The applicants are also happy to accept suggested conditions number 25 and 26 to ensure that the privacy of adjacent properties is protected going forward. In terms of drainage, foul water will be discharged via a new on-site sewers to the existing Thames Water sewer on Monk Sherborne Road, while surface water runoff generated by the development will be attenuated on site and then discharged to the sewers on San Martin Close and the subsequent watercourse to the east. So in summary, the site remains an appropriate location for a small residential scheme of this nature. The council concede they cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, a situation that could become worse with the existing nitrate issue in the borough. In this respect, the proposed development would make a small but worthwhile contribution to the situation on a site that is not within the AONB, a conservation area or a flood risk zone. In short, the proposals do not fall down against the presumption in favour of sustainable development, as the adverse impacts do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. To the contrary, we would say that the benefits significantly and demonstrably outweigh the impacts, and that the proposals are in line with the previous inspector's comments. We therefore respectfully request that technical details consent be granted accordingly in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr Pettit? Councillor Rattigan, followed by Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Pettit, grey water storage, we are going through a period of high drought at the moment. Can you comment on that and what this site would bring to that?
The applicants are committed to providing grey water recycling, air source heat pumps, air cooling systems, underfloor heating. We submitted a sustainability statement as part of the application which outlines the types of things that the applicant's looking to incorporate on site, and we'd be happy to accept a condition which required us to submit further details should permission be granted.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr Pettit. Just a comment, please. Could you explain why you chose not to use San Martin Close as an access?
The landowner would like to, as you can see on the site plan, I'm not sure if you can put the site plan up, but on the site plan you can see that the landowner wants to retain an access through to the field beyond, which he will be retaining in his ownership for agricultural purposes. So the intention was that any agricultural vehicles would be able to continue to go along San Martin Close into the field, and then the residential development would be served off Monk Sherborne Road. I mean, the inspector's decision's clear that there isn't an in-principle objection to accessing the site from Monk Sherborne Road, and what we're proposing is in line with Manual for Streets. The visibility displays 2.4 by 43 is what you are required to provide in a 30-mile-per-hour limit zone, and is consistent with the speed survey data. So, and Hampshire County Council have no objection.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr Pettit. Questions to officers? Councillor Harvey.
Can I ask the question regarding the allegations on the speed survey? Just where do we stand with the evidence on that from Hampshire County Council? Do they acknowledge the issues that were presented, and are they simply saying, no, actually it's not an issue, or is it something actually that hasn't been considered?
Highways engineers at Hampshire County Council, they reviewed the revised information and the revised report, and based on that, they found the proposed access to be acceptable. It's because of the visibility displays can be achieved, and the visibility displays are acceptable for the speed, prevailing speed on the street.
Any more questions for officers? No? In that case, debate. Okay. Well, our hands are pretty well tied on this one because it's been granted the PEP, it's got permission in principle for this number of dwellings. We are only looking at the design of the houses, the layout and the access. We can't refuse. We had a lot of letters, people want us to refuse this application outright. We can't do that, that's not within our power. So the design of the houses and the layout within the site is perfectly normal. There's nothing odd about it. It's okay. The big issue is this access. And we've heard from the local that St Martin Close is not a highway. It's owned by the Housing Association. So getting access across that would be difficult. So the only place they can legally access this is directly off Monk Sherborne Road. So whilst I'm not happy about this at all, as I said, our hands are tied. We've got to look at it in the light of the PIP that's already been granted. I'll leave it there because there's a couple of hands up. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add that if we're headed in the direction of potentially approving this, in reference to Mr Pettit's comments that the applicant was willing and has written in their environmental statement or thereabouts, the design statement about air source heat pumps and solar, are we able to, as we've done on some of the previous ones, put this as a condition that they comply with what they have put on the table, please?
Unfortunately, you'll have heard us say this to you before, we don't have a policy within our current local plan that would be able to hook that to, so we couldn't add a condition to that effect. We do have a condition on recommended in terms of the water efficiency, because that links back to policy EM9 of our plan. So there is that element of climate issue that we can do, but not beyond that.
Anybody else wish to speak on this? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have to say, I'm very unhappy regarding this application because I'm very torn. I know that I was on the committee that rejected the PIP the first time, and I'm frankly quite appalled that we've had the power taken out of our hands, and the only thing that we can decide on is effectively the access. Okay. One of the things I'm just wondering is, with the access and all the speed surveys being done, do we know, was it a tabletop survey that was done by Hampshire County Council, or whether it was an actual, sort of visit? Okay. If it was a tabletop exercise, then I have to say that I'm very concerned because it seems to be at the thinnest point, okay, the narrowest point of the road, and I'm just wondering whether there will be any way of if we were to reject this, okay, whether the access could be moved, okay, to make it more acceptable. Yeah, and so I'm very torn by this. Thank you.
Looking on the plan, moving the access one way is going to bring it nearer the bend and reduce the visibility splay, and moving it the other way is going to put it nearer the junction. I think we really are stuck with a decision that none of us like, because we turned this whole site down. We didn't, as a committee, we didn't want it developed. We've been overruled on that, and it comes down to, on the basis that we've been overruled on the fact that it is being developed, is this an acceptable form of development? And with no objection from highways, as I said, our hands are tied, and on that basis, I am going to move for approval in line with the officer's recommendation. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I too I'm against this, and I'm slightly appalled that I'm even having to say this, but our hands are completely tied. I don't like the access, okay, but reluctantly, and it is with extreme reluctance, I'll second your motion, because I don't think we've got anywhere else to go. Thank you.
I think we're both rather in the same place. Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? Oh, no. Okay, and those against? You're abstaining. So that was 12, wasn't it? Thank you. Sadly, that has been approved. Letter, if you could confirm the recommendation.
And the recommendation was to approve subject to condition and legal agreement.
Can we just have it noted, and thanks to our officers for presenting the report, and the fact that we do not have a Hampshire County Council's representative here this evening to assist this committee. As usual, they have chosen not to be here, but our officers are here doing their job for them, and I completely and thoroughly object to that because of the issues that you've raised.
Thank you. Item number 4, tennis courts, Laverstoke Lane, Laverstoke. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is a retrospective application for the retention of 10 telescopic floodlights with a maximum height of 4.6 metres. Each pole has 2 floodlights on it. I draw your attention to the update paper and the viewing panel report, and there's clarification that the agent gave us in terms of the poles, and that there's 2 floodlights per pole, and also in terms of the level of illumination. Because you have 2 floodlights in each pole, it's actually 2 times 14822 lumens. The officer's recommendation is still for approval.
Thank you. If we could have our first speakers, which is Mr. Brettel, supported by Mr. White. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Good evening to you both, and you have 4 minutes between you, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Good, thank you. I'm a parish councillor from Laverstoke and Freefolk Parish Council, and my name is James. Together with Andrew, we are here in our capacity from the PC, and also as landlord and licensor for the Whitchurch Tennis Club. Unfortunately, we are objecting to this application, and we ask you to do the same. The high-intensity modern lighting that is currently installed, we feel, is out of context of the area. It is a rural hamlet with low-intensity street lighting, surrounded by mature trees in a conservation area within a Grade 2 listed park. Whilst the application seeks to reinstate historic lights, it should be understood in the context of the application that the lights ceased to be used prior to the year 2000. The light usage was infrequent, and due to the age and technology, the level of intensity and light spread was far less intrusive than we currently have. The proposed lighting is a substantial upgrade to the long-disused lighting, and we would contend this application should be treated as a new development in a conservation area. The lighting that currently is installed and is being discussed in this application produces a level of intrusion on the residents of Laverstoke Lane that was not anticipated or demonstrated when permission was sought from the PC. Unfortunately, despite several attempts to control the level of glare, it still has too great an impact on the local residents. And we feel that the tennis club has yet to arrive at or demonstrate to us that the correct angle of lights and positioning of mitigation cows has been achieved. Indeed, the time of year at which the lights will be used the most in the winter, they will have the most impact on the residents facing onto the tennis courts. There are mature trees surrounding this park that would currently afford some level of natural protection. In the winter, those trees will lose their leaves, we'll have longer nights, and the light intrusion will be there. When the lights were first installed and used back in March 2021, they unfortunately weren't appropriately commissioned, and light was glaring directly into residents' front bedrooms and front rooms, and this has resulted in a great deal of objection and resentment from the local residents. As it may be of interest, but the lights that are installed are not approved by the Lawn Tennis Association, and the application would potentially set a precedent for other areas of the sports field, so we don't feel it should be considered in isolation. As landlord and licenser, we also object. The PC had a discussion with the tennis club about a proposal for the lights, and we were presented with a technical specification that showed a 3D photo simulation that didn't show any impact on the residents or the surrounding area. That at the time we felt was considered to be in line with the historic use. We have tried to be proactive and help with the angling of the lights and mocking up of additional temporary cowls. Whilst these did reduce the extreme glare, they didn't resolve the issue of illuminating the properties in front of the courts or the surrounding mature trees, has the effect of bouncing light back around the park. Thank you. When the retrospective planning application was published in 2021, it became evident that the specification for the lights was different from the one that we had approved. The total number of lumens, the light output, is 297,000 versus 145,000 that we had approved. That is double. It also shows that there are 2 lights per pole rather than 1 light per pole. It was also our understanding when we approved the installation of lights that they would be used for 2 club nights per year and for occasional competition matches. This was fundamental to our supporting the installation of the lights as a landlord. When we asked for confirmation of the timing back in August before the application was submitted in October of last year, the club advised us they wanted to use them for 7 days a week. That was not our original understanding. In summary, both the light specification, the number of fittings, and the impact and spread of the light to the surrounding conservation area and the residential properties, together with the intended hours of use, have not been approved by us as the landlord or licenser. And we do not feel the club have permission to use the lights in their current form from us.
Carry on.
Done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Could you turn the microphone off, please? Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? Councillor Court.
Madam Chair, you mentioned you've seen some details of the fittings. Have you actually seen any documentation which has been signed to say it's been installed with the Lawn Tennis Association or the Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineer recommendations?
If I may answer. No, we haven't seen any documentation from the Lawn Tennis Association or the building company that you mentioned.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. You said that they've made it clear to you that they want to use it 7 nights a week. Is that they will use it 7 nights a week, or is that they want the opportunity to do so? Because the fact that they can use it 7 nights a week with your permission doesn't mean it will happen any more than twice a year that they initially said, for example.
So I think I've grasped it. Andrew might want to overrule me. Yes, we were on the understanding it was Tuesdays and Thursdays was club nights, and then occasional competition nights. I think they were up to 12 a year. So we expected them to be 104 plus 12.
Yeah, that was our expectation. As for whether they want to use it for full 7 nights a week or year, we're not 100% sure of their intentions. I think it's best to clarify that with the tennis club.
Thank you. No more questions? Thank you very much. And if we could have our next speakers, which is Miss Frith, Mr Brown, Mrs Baker and Miss Hudson. Good evening to the three of you. You have 4 minutes between you. How you break that up is entirely between you. I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening. I'm going to focus on three key issues. First of all, Whitchurch Tennis Club broke the law in installing lighting without planning permission. They ignored LTA guidance. The lighting is not that recommended for rural settings. They broke the trust and goodwill between themselves and us, the landlord and host community. Secondly, the environmental impact has been ignored. Despite evidence supplied to the council concerning environmental impact and the necessity, requirement and request for an environmental survey, no such exercise has been carried out. Laverstoke evenings are characterised by dark skies, abundant nocturnal wildlife and quiet, enhancing its conservation status. Artificial lighting potentially destroys this. Lastly, the parish council and majority community vehemently oppose this unsuitable nighttime development. Placing the demands of Whitchurch Tennis Club on the entire village of Laverstoke, its environs, homes and wildlife is unjust, unfair and unsuitable. Breaking the law, ignoring environmental impact and major local opposition. How can you defend your decision if you approve it? How does this comply with your own guidelines? Chris.
This application fails to meet the council's own planning criteria. Outdoor tennis court accessibility. There are floodlit facilities in Overton within the 10-minute time frame. The Clean Neighbourhoods and Environment Act 2005 and Environmental Protection Act 1990. Light pollution can now be designated a statutory nuisance where it affects a neighbour. Living opposite the courts, I can assure you that it does. Landscape, biodiversity and trees supplementary planning document concerning the impact of the effects of lights, especially any strong floodlighting, on important nocturnal species such as bats. No bat survey or environmental survey has been done. The biodiversity response to the application asks, can the applicant also confirm that the lighting will be in line with recommendations from the Bat Conservation Trust? There has been no such confirmation. The biodiversity officer also stated, we need to be sure that the works will not result in an offence under the Regulation 41(1) of the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. In our view, it does. The harm to our quiet rural hamlet far outweighs any benefits, none of which accrue to residents. The disingenuous approach of the tennis club has been reprehensible. You've heard from the parish council that the tennis club installed double the number of lights previously agreed at more than double the lumens. That's like you approve a 2-bedroomed house and then they build a 5-bedroomed house. Would you reward that with approval?
Thank you. Good time. And then just, would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here tonight, for us to be able to express our views from the local area. I'm not going to go back over anything that's in your...
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you turn one microphone off?
Oh, I've got two, apologies.
Yeah, that's it. If you can turn yours back on now. Lovely.
So I'm not going to go back over anything that you've got in your papers. I just wanted to add a few aspects to it from a very personal perspective. As an active sports coach myself, I can understand the desire to improve opportunities for participation and facilities for its members. Anyone wants to do that. But I hope whatever I do is in conjunction and with consideration of the local community and the impact it has on them. COVID has shown us the importance of physical activity on our health and well-being, and there's no doubt about that. But it's also taught us about respect and tolerance. So that's respect for ourselves, respect for our neighbours, and respect for our community. When visited by the tennis club on the 10th of April, just after the lights had been installed, I was told the lights would only be used twice a week and play would be finished by 9 o'clock. That being the case, if the planning application had been submitted on that basis, I probably would not have objected. But to me, 365 days a year, okay, I will do it until 10 p.m. is not something I can support. I've not seen a development plan for the tennis club. However, Councillor Maitland has said that...
Sorry, I will have to ask you to stop.
Okay.
It is strictly 4 minutes and you're somewhere in the region of 4.5 now. So.
Okay, I apologise. Can I just make a point that there's only 388 residents in Laverstoke, and therefore it is a small area for significant impacts. Thank you.
Can you confirm your names, please? Because we've got 4 speakers listed and only 3 of you here.
Yes, my name is Gillian Baker.
My name is Christopher Brown.
And I'm Liv First.
Thank you. Questions for the speakers? Okay, I have one. If you could turn your microphone off, it would be... Thank you. One microphone mutes another one out, so it causes chaos with the recordings. If there was a compromise situation on this where the operating hours were reduced anything up to significantly, would that help the situation from your point of view?
We would like to see an environmental impact exercise taking place. We have 7 species of bats in our area, 2 from the endangered list.
Sorry, that's not the question I asked.
Well, the question is that where we would not support the application unless all the different steps were taken to ensure that the lighting does not affect our wildlife, and apart from the fact that it comes into our homes.
Okay, thank you very much. You can turn your microphone. Anybody else got any questions? No, thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Bradley and Miss Longton. Good evening to you both. You have 4 minutes between you and the microphone button is in front of you. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Is that it there?
Yeah.
Am I on? Hello, good evening. I'm Emma Longton. I'm the Welfare and Safeguarding Officer at Whitchurch Tennis Club. Whitchurch Tennis Club is a non-profit making organisation run by volunteers and accessible to all. Our membership is £68 a year and just £10 for juniors. We're an inclusive club and we waive fees on occasions, as we have done recently for Ukrainian refugees who have moved into the area. So why do we need lights? In the summer, children can play after school and adults can fit in a match after work. However, the summer season is short. By the end of September, the sun will be setting well before 7 p.m, and low-level lights mean play will have to stop a while before they're due to visibility. Without lighting, school children and working adults are effectively limited to weekend play for most of the year. No after-work matches, no after-school clubs. It's hard to fit a busy club's play into a weekend, whilst for many families the weekends are full of other activities. So why can't people play on other lit courts? Most clubs with lighting are private clubs and beyond the budgets of many families. Also, working parents often do not have the time to ferry their children to after-school clubs which aren't local or indeed play themselves. Working with Laverstoke and Free Folk Parish Council. Historically, we have had a great relationship with the LFPC. We were invited and then persuaded by the LFPC to move to Laverstoke Lane in 2011 to help keep the Portal Sports area a sports area. There were existing floodlights on these courts, but they weren't kept due to the lack of funds. We gave up one of our courts for the LFPC to establish a hard-standing play area for their community and worked with them in 2019 to secure an LIF grant from Basingstoke and Dean, which we built a junior court and hitting wall, which is open to all. One of the conditions of the grant was to increase membership and run coaching sessions. Lights will help us achieve both these aims by making our courts more usable throughout the year. We approached the Parish Council regarding floodlighting the courts in the spring of 2020. In September 2020, following various discussions and meetings, including inviting local residents to see our plans, we were given the go-ahead by the LFPC by email to install retractable lights. The Parish Council even recommended an electrician who installed them in March 2021. Having consulted with the Parish Council already, we were surprised to be met with some opposition to the lights when they were first used. However, we were keen to address the concerns of the local community and knocked on the door of everyone overlooking the tennis courts to hear their views and to try and accommodate them. This led to a month of testing with different angles of the lights and, at the tennis club's suggestion and expense, the use of cowls. The cowls were designed with the help of the then chairman of the LFPC. In May 2021, we were advised that we should apply for retrospective planning permission. At the request of the LFPC, the planning permission applied for was to use it just until 10 p.m. at night. Although we were advised by Basingstoke and Dean that we could use the lights while the decision was pending, we chose not to out of respect for the democratic planning process. We have continued to meet with members of the Parish Council and also attended an open parish meeting to hear concerns of residents. So in summary, we appreciate the rural nature of the courts. The lights will only be extended and switched on when the courts are being used. It is unlikely that they will be used in June and July and rarely used in May and August. The winter traffic will be no more than the summer traffic because we only have 2 courts. At Whitchurch Tennis Club, we believe in giving every child a chance to become the next Emma Radnacano or Andy Murray, whilst also enabling those not so gifted to have some fun and exercise. This is in line with the Basingstoke Sports Council objectives, and as the recent pandemic has shown us, it's important for physical and mental health and well-being. For Whitchurch Tennis Club and their 190 members, Whitchurch Tennis Club need to play its part. We need all year round access to play on courts that everybody can reach and afford, and for this we need lighting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Questions for the speakers? Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very well-trodden and well-known path with lights and tennis clubs that you need planning permission, and anyone installing lights would also advise you of that. And I speak as a past chairman and secretary of the Walton Hill Sports Club, where we've got lighting on 3 courts. Was no one on your committee aware that you basically needed planning permission to undertake an activity such as this?
Sorry, could you put the microphone on, please?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. It sounds daft now, but we were advised by the Parish Council that we didn't need planning permission because it was a temporary structure inside an existing compound. Having been then advised that we did need planning, we got clarification with Basingstoke and Dean and obviously applied retrospectively.
Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard from other speakers tonight that they were being lied to, but by presumably yourselves, about the number of days that you would use it, the number of lights that were going to be installed, the total lumen output. Do you have any comment on that? Has a lie been told at any point?
No, a lie has not been told. During the process of the month where we were trying to get the cowls and the angles right, we said that we would only use it on a Tuesday and Thursday. We had permission by email after consultation with the Laverstoke Parish Council, and there was no limit on the days that we were doing them. To be perfectly honest, we couldn't really afford or put it through our committee if it was only 2 nights a week, because it's an outside court. We can only play when it's not icy, it's not windy, and it's not raining. And to limit us to 2 nights a week means that a lot of the time we wouldn't be able to use them. So it would have never been something that we would have agreed to at the time, and we wouldn't have spent our grant money on buying the lights.
Councillor Tomlin.
Good evening. In getting the lighting set up, did you take any design advice from lighting companies? Did somebody work it all out? Have you got some sort of, well, we don't need to see the documentation, but you've got a design that you work to? We used a professional lighting company, Dhaka, and they have installed these lights on a number of tennis courts. I went to visit one near Billingshurst to see them firsthand. I'm not a light engineer, and the first night they were turned on, they were at the incorrect angles, which is something we corrected straight away. And as you've heard from my colleague, we've gone to the extra expense of putting cowls on to reduce glare.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. Did you actually commission this company yourself and pay their fees?
Yes, we did.
So would you consider a right of redress to this company to ask them why you're having these complaints?
Probably not, because the lights are the lights, and we'd have redress if we hadn't been able to change the angles. But we can change the angles, and the cowling has reduced the glare, which, you know, the site was visited by environmental health when the lights were on, and they were happy with them.
Thank you. No more hands up? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at Appendix A, page 199. Okay, and the parish council say that the original proposed lighting spec, which was presented to the parish council in August 2020 and agreed in September 22, was 10 lamps at 199 watts each. Okay, and what was installed was 20 lamps at 100 watts each. Can you explain the difference?
But basically, between the original discussions, the light technology improved. It was the correct lights of what are in the application. Sorry, the planning application. But it was discussed and worked with the then chairman of the Laverstoke and Freefolk Parish Council with the cowls. He actually made some temporary ones for us to work on and was happy with them and gave us the go ahead to get the cowls at the existing lights, or the existing lumens, if you like.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands up, so thank you very much. And if we could have Councillor Ashfield. Evening, Councillor Ashfield. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, Development Committee. I want to take this opportunity to provide my support to the application presented this evening. The opportunity to play tennis in the evenings and into the winter months is important to maintain the interest of members, particularly younger players. Laverstoke has a sporting legacy from the long association with Portals. Developing the facility should be considered a positive step. I'm encouraged to hear that membership has continued to grow at Whitchurch Tennis Club since pre-COVID times, given the recent investment into the new courts and surrounds. In 2018-19, Basingstoke and Dean supported the club with a lift grant, and I've been pleased to read from the monitoring report the positive outcomes of the project, which included the reduction of waiting lists for young people, the improvement of coaching facilities, improved health and safety, and disabled access. The permitted use of floodlights will extend the usefulness of this sporting facility and contribute to the continued financial viability of the tennis club and provision of sport and recreation within our ward. Whilst I support the application, I am not ignoring the objections from neighbouring properties concerned about overspill of lighting into their homes and the street scene. I was not a councillor when this application came forward, so it's been difficult for me to understand where the communication breakdown between the parish council and Whitchurch Tennis Club has come about, as there appeared to have been some cooperation in earlier discussions between the parties. Whitchurch Tennis Club know they need to reassure residents that the use of the lights will be sensible. Whitchurch Tennis Club has already committed to the parish council only last week that if planning permission is granted tonight, that they will not switch on the floodlights without re-engaging with residents. I hope that the committee approve these plans so that myself and the other ward councillors can continue working with Laverstoke and Freefolk Parish Council and Whitchurch Tennis Club to get the relationship back on track. Councillor Steve Williams and I attended a meeting last week with both parties to re-establish dialogue, and we're all confident of a reasonable compromise and a good outcome for everyone involved. But obviously this is a regretful situation tonight to have to be here.
Questions for Councillor Ashfield? Okay. Councillor Ashfield, if a condition was put on this, if it was approved, and the condition at the moment is up until 10 o'clock at night. If those operating hours were reduced to a much earlier time, say, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock at night, how would you feel? Do you feel that would be an appropriate compromise? So very early evening, kids come, after school could access the facility without these lights shining into people's bedroom windows at a time when certainly children are going to bed and possibly some adults are going to bed if they're on an early start the following morning.
I don't play tennis and I don't live in Laverstoke. I don't think I'm necessarily the right person to say what would be the right conditions to put on this application. I think permission being granted on this application means that we can go away and re-engage both parties together. The fact of the matter is that the parish council are landlord and license the Whitchurch Tennis Club to use the courts and can really control whether or not the tennis club have access to electricity to turn them on. So getting this permission is really just the first stage. The two parties then need to go back, and I'm sure that Whitchurch Tennis Club want to operate in partnership with the parish council. It's a dreadful situation for everybody to be in. I'm sure both parties are sat here tonight listening to me and thinking it's easy for her to say. She wasn't here when this application came forward. I hope it's not naive of me to think that we can start from scratch to re-engage and to have a constructive conversation. But absolutely, that does require all parties, and I don't just mean the council, the parish council and the tennis club, but also residents to come forward with an open mind to take these discussions forward.
Thank you. Any more questions for Councillor Ashfield? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Howard Sorrell, followed by Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. There's an image that's floated by a few times of the lights taken from one of the houses opposite. Do you know when that was taken? Because one of them looks exceptionally bright, and I'm wondering if that was prior to the adjustment or the installation of the cowls. You're not allowed, I don't think, but...
Sorry, there's no dialogue with members of the public once questioning has finished, and questioning has finished, so if you could please leave Councillor Howard Sorrell to say what he wishes to say.
Well, yeah, right. As I said, I was wondering if we know if that's after the cowls were installed. If you don't have that information, that's fine. I possibly should have asked it earlier, but that just to me seems exceptionally bright. I think there's another one that looks even worse than that. Yeah, that one. That's if that's post cowl installation, post adjustment of angle, that is a problem.
If I can just confirm, that's with the cowls on, and they were the photos were taken by the case officer.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one, really. Obviously, I'd like to give, Councillor Ashcroft as much time as we possibly could, okay, to try and repair the relationship between these two parties. And I'm just wondering, okay, what would be the maximum amount of delay that we could give with this planning permission in order to allow her to act as an intermediary between the two parties?
If I could just confirm, what's before you is the retrospective retention of those lights. The planning system is not there to allow for dialogue between two parties where it's broken down. I would say and repeat, I think that what the councillor has said, at the end of the day, it's the parish who have the overall control in terms of that they're the landlord and they control the sports club there. And it's a matter really between them. It sits outside the planning system. So before you tonight is whether those lights are acceptable. The fact that they're retrospective is not relevant either for your determination tonight either.
Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. So is it possible that we could produce a condition that would have the applicant undertake a design or a conversation with the supplier to actually address these issues to see what could be done?
Yeah, no, we couldn't do that. I mean, you need to make a decision on the application before you. You could possibly consider a temporary permission, but that's not what the application is before you. You really need to make a decision on what's here.
The other thing is, if you're going to consider a temporary consent, you'd have to consider the reasons why you're doing it. Why is it necessary? As the officer's report states here, there is no statutory light nuisance according to the environmental health officer, so you'd have to establish why, if you considered a temporary consent, what would it achieve? That's all I know.
Councillor Howard Sorrell.
I have two questions, but I know I've already asked one. One of them is a supplementary to the previous. So the image that's exceptionally bright, do we know where that was taken from directly? Is that from, it doesn't look like it's come from out of a window. That looks like they maybe stood low down on their driveway, and I know the houses were uphill, so it might look exceptionally bright, but it might just be really bright at the bottom of their driveway and then, not actually be that bright in the windows. Again, that's not the worst of the two images. That one's not so bad. That one seems like it's taken from lower down and is a lot brighter. Do we know, presumably, that's from the edge of the road, so it's not as bad through the windows? That's my supplementary, and then I've got...
If I could just point out the titles to each of the photos, it tells you where they're taken from.
I mean, a picture's meant to tell 1,000 words, so... anyways, in that case, there we go, question answered. My other question would be, can we postpone our decision? I can't remember what the exact terminology is, in order to allow the commission of a wildlife survey, as was mentioned by some people this evening.
The biodiversity officer is happy with the proposals and they're not raising objections, so I would say no.
Councillor Tomlin.
Okay, so next question. If we refuse the application, what would be the time scale that the applicant would have to remove the poles and thus had time for another application to come back in?
I mean, the timescale for them to remove them is up to the committee to decide. I mean, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, but that's something that you would have to decide is a reasonable period for them to remove them.
But if the applicant put in an appeal, then it wouldn't be reasonable to have them removed at all until the appeal had been determined.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify this application? Is it for 365 days a year and used until 10 o'clock at night?
Yes, potentially. If you had perfect playing conditions, as the applicant suggested, that it was not wet, windy, snowing, icy, then potentially, yes, you would have 365 days between those hours. So you could use the lights between the hours of 4 and 10.
Okay. Any more questions for officers? No. In that case, we move to debate. And Councillor Faulkner, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that we've got to this position, I think. As I say, having been chairman and secretary for 35 years and a trustee of a tennis club, it's a very, very well-known path with the LTA in terms of advice on what you should do if you're going to put floodlights onto a tennis course. There's a tremendous amount of stuff there, so it's a great surprise the lighting contractors didn't, shall we say, pick that up. In terms of the issue is the light pollution, so you don't need to enforce removing poles. What you enforce is they're not used. And likewise, when an installation is done, it's a non-trivial exercise putting in the power supplies where you have the cut-offs at 10 o'clock, so you can't abuse your planning permission, i.e. you're not dependent upon people switching it off, etc. So I think I have a bit of a quandary because obviously I'm very pro-tennis, but in this situation, it needs a bit more professional advice to turn this into an acceptable facility where everybody's happy. And that's something we've had for 40 years at Walton Hill.
Councillor Harvey, followed by myself.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier this evening we had an application that created a significant debate, and our hands were tied by the planning laws and the planning rules that we're supposed to follow. It happens most meetings when we're faced with these difficult decisions. Sorry, Ron. I say earlier this evening we had an application where members were angst over the planning laws and the planning rules being applied to a particular application, and again we're guided by those same rules and those same laws. The application before us, as written, is what we've got to judge, not how we would like it to be, not how we would think it should be. It's how it actually is before us. We have a biodiversity officer that has told us that they have no objection given the submitted lux levels. And those lux levels, if you go to the element of saying, are 10 watts less than was the original proposed. It might be the difference in luminescence, but they are actually in some ways equivalent to, and there are different arguments being presented as to the impact quite clearly. And the photographs say one thing, and our officers and the evidence presented says something else. And photographs are photographs, but technical evidence is technical evidence, so we've got to weigh it all up. The Historic Environment Officer also says there is no objection in the context of the historic area. The Environmental Health Officer says there is no objection in the context of the lighting that's being presented. Sport England have made various comments in support. So the reality is the application actually in front of us, as per our officer's advice, is quite clearly there for approval. And to find a reason for rejection that would actually stand up to scrutiny under appeal is going to be difficult. I noted there's 52 letters of objection, but there's also 51 letters of support. This has clearly divided the community. And those residents who live closest to this, of course, are those that are most impacted on it. And why would they not be, given the arguments they've given? It's totally understandable. Of course it is. So unless there's going to be some compromise that this committee can't impose, we can't force the parish to talk to with the residents to the tennis club. But my goodness me, they need to. I mean, on the reality of just the human side of this, there needs to be some more conversation going on to reach a compromise. And that's a compromise from everybody, including the residents. There needs to be some sort of engagement here that results in some solution that resolves the issue once and for all. If the parish council gave permission originally, which they did, clearly from the evidence that's been presented, and they have changed their mind, and there is a difference of opinion because it's different parish councillors now, and I understand that, then again, heads needs to be in some sense banged together to get a resolution to move forward. All we can do as a planning committee is judge the application that is actually on the paper in front of us. And there isn't a single reason in the officer's report that you could genuinely hang an objection on, because the officers tell us such in the report as the evidence presented. So on that basis, I would move approval. But by goodness me, please talk to each other and get a resolution, because that's what you genuinely need to do. Find a way through this for your community and the tennis club. But there's nothing in this paper that we can find, that I can find, to hang a genuine reason for rejection on that would stand up to an appeal inspector scrutiny. And we've already been turned over once this evening by an appeal inspector.
Thank you. Before I say what I was going to say, and still am going to say, Councillor Frost, are you seconding the? Yes. Thank you. I understand what Councillor Harvey said, and he's made some very good points. I live in an unlit area fronting onto a village green. It has tennis courts on it, strangely enough. And I look at some of the slides that we've seen, not that one, but the ones that are taken from the houses above. Ones like those, yeah, those two. If somebody put that outside my house, I would be very, very unhappy, to say the least. And I think that would be an invasion of my local amenity and other people's amenity. So whilst I understand what Councillor Harvey said, I cannot vote for this. If we will go to the vote in a minute, if this is approved, well, it's approved. If it's refused, the applicant gets a free second chance to put in another application without cost. And what I really suggest, if this is refused, is the applicant gets together with all the parties and they sit down and they work it out between them. Because we all want to encourage sport, we all want to encourage tennis. You know, we've had a wonderful summer of sport. We had fantastic results in Commonwealth Games. We had a fantastic result in the ladies' football. And all those results start in clubs like this. So I really, really want to encourage a club. But I think as this is presented, it is a huge impact on the local community on an unlit area. So I won't be supporting Councillor Harvey's motion for the reasons I've said. Anyway, it has been moved for approval. It's been seconded for approval. So those in favour of approval? 1, 2, 3, 4. I make that 4 people. And those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Can you keep your hands up, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I make that 8. Thank you. That motion is lost, so I will now move for refusal. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tomlin. Thank you. Moved and seconded.
Sorry, you need to have your reasons, and also you will need to, you know, it's a retrospective application, so you also need to take
Do we enforce?
enforcement.
Okay.
And what those
Reason for refusal is loss of amenity to local residents. Is that enough?
Your reasons, but we can work with that.
We can work with that. Do we take this separately from enforcement?
No, we have to make two separate.
Okay, so just,
because
okay.
you need to have your specific reasons.
Yeah,
for
those, it's been moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 8. It should be 8. Yep. Okay. That application has been refused.
Against.
Sorry. Sorry. Those against? 1, 2, 3. 3. Thank you, then. That application has been refused. Right. Now we have to go to enforcement. It sounds to me that the parish council have got the big switch on the electricity meter. So it strikes me there is no need to enforce this because they can enforce it themselves.
It's a retrospective.
So okay, so we need to. Sorry.
Yeah. So what you need to make a decision is what steps are required. What do they need to do?
Yeah.
And how are you going to give them to do it? And the reasons why it needs to be removed.
Okay. Do you want to explain that one?
Okay, so in terms of taking an enforcement action, what the committee needs to decide is what the steps are required to rectify the breach of planning, the current unauthorised works, the period of compliance to carry out those, and the expediency, i.e. the reasons for taking enforcement action.
I think a big part of this is going to be whether or not there is actually a negotiated sense of some sort of resolution, and enforcing it that they have to immediately remove the posts is one thing, but the parish council can turn the electricity off to make sure they can't be used. But if we simply say now, you've got to get them out, they're going to have to find the money to get them out, then what happens? There's just a sense of, is there a resolution? If there isn't, there isn't. And they have to come out, they have to come out. But where do we find a timeline that's reasonable that would achieve that end of a chance for negotiation? And if not, the action then taken?
Okay, thank you. Before, I appreciate there are a couple of hands up. The advice I'm being given is that it might be prudent to defer this decision for a later committee in 2 months' time, and that will give the parties a chance to negotiate with each other and hopefully come up with a solution so we don't have to make that decision. So is everybody, I move for a deferral on the enforcement. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tomlin. Those in favour of defer?
For 2 months.
For 2 months, yeah. And that looks to me to be, 12 out of 13. And those against deferral? And 1 abstention? Thank you. Right. Oh, that was hard work, wasn't it? Thank you, everybody. It was...
Do you want us to confirm that?
Yes, please confirm.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just confirm that the application has been refused on the basis of loss of amenity to local residents and that's policy EN10, that the enforcement action be deferred for 2 months to allow discussions to take place between the parties.
Right. Sorry? Right. Item 5, 4 Fairfields Road, Basingstoke. Aletta.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a change of use from C1 guest house to sui generis for a 21 resident house in multiple occupation and demolition of existing garage, which is currently located at the rear of the site. I would like to draw your attention to the update paper and in relation to the site viewing report and minor changes to conditions to refer to the latest revision of the NPPF 2021. The recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Aletta. There are no speakers, so questions to officers? No? No question to officers. In that case, debate. Councillor Hussey.
Well done, Paul. Thank you. 50% increase in the number of bedrooms. And so I'm going to address my comments and my views to that increase of 50%. The report clearly states that it's expected for a 21 bedroom HMO for 21 parking spaces. But it argues that as it's so near the town centre, we can get away with 14. I disagree. I disagree because if that is wrong, where will those additional people park? This is the residents-only parking area, the Fairfields area. The policy states quite clearly 1 permit per dwelling and 1 visitor permit per dwelling, where it meets the criteria of not having sufficient space off-road for parking. The policy hasn't always been applied. Officers regularly, and in this area, have the discretion to award 2 permits per household with a visitor's permit. But recently, due to demand for parking in the area, they're now enforcing 1 only. And residents who were renewed in March, some of them have been refused the 2nd space that they were used to. By going up by another 7 units, 7 bedrooms, potentially that's 7 more visitor permits, putting more pressure on the area. And I'd like you to look at one of the diagrams, and I did have my on page 235. Imagine all 14 parking spaces are occupied, and somebody drives in because they can't see the back of the property, looking for a parking space, and there isn't one. The amount of room to do a 3-point turn when all the parking spaces are occupied is quite restricted. People will reverse out. In addition, you've got the situation where somebody's trying to drive in and somebody's trying to drive out. Somebody's going to have to reverse. Reversing out into this road, which is a 20-mile-an-hour parking limit, because there's a school, it's school runs, is not a good idea. And if you look at the entrance to the property to the west, number 6, has got a 3.5-foot high wall. You cannot see, reversing out, a child. I just think that the increase of 21 to 20, by 7 to 21 is aggravating the situation of parking. It's going to have an adverse impact on the area, contrary to what the report says, because of the demand for parking in that area. And on those grounds, I believe that this application should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Hussey. Is that a move for refusal? It is. Been moved for refusal. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bowes, thank you. We'll take a little bit more debate before we go to the vote on this. Anybody else got anything they want to say? Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hussey, for moving refusal on this, because I would do exactly the same. I do have massive concerns about the parking ability. Also, I think we need to be aware that management of HMOs within this borough is very poor. My understanding is that there has been bullying and violence in a number of them, and they were confirmed to me when I was leader of the council. Now, obviously, each should be judged on its own merits, but this looks like a huge overdevelopment of the site. The fact that only 5 years ago it was going to be 8 flats into an extension. This now looks like there's no control over how many people are in each HMO. Now, there's nothing to say that this couldn't be couples in the end, because they have private facilities in terms of their ensuite and everything else. I just feel this is overdevelopment, and of course it is within the conservation area, and I do think that is a material reason for the impact upon that it would diminish from the conservation area, and we should, in all good conscience, try and preserve the nature and ambience of conservation areas, and I cannot, in all due conscience, support this application, and therefore I'm happy with the moving of refusal.
Councillor Hussey.
I missed out one point I wanted to raise. If you look on page 234, at the west elevation, you'll see there's a door coming out onto a narrow strip, a road, with cars potentially reversing, whatever. I just think with that access on the east elevation, that should be blocked off. That is dangerous.
So just to clarify, the motion proposed by Councillor Hussey for refusal was in relation to the parking provision and the pressure that would have on street parking, given... Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that so members were clear on what that was, because Councillor Rattigan mentioned other matters.
Okay, been moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour of refusal? And that's 12. And refusal? 1. Thank you. That has been refused. Letter, could you confirm?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So the application is to be refused on the basis of under-provision of car parking and impact on the additional pressure for on-street car parking within the area.
Thank you. Right, number 6, Red House, London Street, Whitchurch. We go back there again. The reason it was deferred, as Councillor Hussey flagged up, was that we had a report that was written which basically said approve, 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 and then because of the previous planning permission decision, the recommendation was rewritten to refuse. And I felt, and obviously Councillor Hussey felt, that that was dangerous and that it would be better to completely rewrite the report. And that's what's in front of us now. So we have, yeah, if you could introduce it. I've done it. Okay, thank you. We have one speaker, and that's Mrs. Winch. Do we have a Mrs. Winch here? No. Well, in that case, there are no speakers. So, questions to officers? No debate. Councillor Harvey.
I support the officers' report and I remove their recommendation.
I'm happy to second it. So, it's been moved and seconded for the officer's recommendation. Those in favour? And yeah, that's everybody. And those against? Yeah, Councillor Frost isn't here. Thank you. If you could confirm.
If I can just confirm that the application was refused for the reasons in the officer's report.
Thank you. And if we could hopefully get Councillor Frost back. We'll give Councillor Frost a minute to come back. Hopefully he's watching on a screen downstairs. And no. Oh well. Number 7, Horse Paddock, Soap Road, St Marybourne. And our letter again.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a change of use of agricultural land to residential, to provide off-street parking and additional external amenity space to the chapel that would be accessed from Gambridge Lane, and the erection of new fencing and gravel hard standing. The application is partly retrospective because some of the enclosures and hard surfacing has been already undertaken. I would like to draw your attention to the update paper and in relation to the application site viewing report and further objections from a neighbour, as well as changes within the report and conditions that now include reference to the latest revision of the NPPF 2021. The recommendation is to refuse. Thank you, Chairman. And enforce.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you, Chairman.
And we could have our first speaker, which is David Peart. Good evening, Mr. Peart or Councillor Peart. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining. Microphone button's in front of you. Could you pop the microphone on? It lights up red when it's. That's it.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is David Peart. I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of St Marybourne Parish Council. During the consultation process, the Parish Council wrote in support of this application, and I'm also speaking in support of the application this evening. There's general consensus amongst the Parish Council that this application should be approved, as the need for this change of use has become more apparent as time has gone on, and refusal could result in a dangerous situation being allowed to continue. When the Council first considered this application, almost 2 years ago, our response was no objection, as a change of use of this relatively small area of agricultural land was to provide off-street parking and additional amenity space for the 4 properties involved. The feeling now is that there is an even stronger case for this being granted, as the old Methodist chapel on this site has now been renovated for residential use and is currently occupied. The chapel, which is situated on a particularly bad bend in the road, has little off-road parking and also in close proximity to the local primary school. The proposed access point is to be from the minor road known as Gangbridge Lane, which is on the other side of the properties away from the main road. Highways have indicated that they have no objection to this proposal. As for the potential flood risk, some of the people who have lodged objections to the application have referred to the field as being in part of a floodplain. However, whilst this may be true, the part of the field that the application applies to is at a higher level and therefore is generally not at risk of flooding. In fact, myself and other parish councillors who have lived in the village for a long time have no recollection of this section of the field ever being flooded. Also on this matter, can I quote from the report to Development Control from the Environment Agency, which states that their position on this is that they consider the proposed works to be classified as water compatible and have no objections. There has also been mention of the impact that this development may have on this part of the conservation area. The Council believes that this improvement to highway safety and the public benefit that will arise from this proposal outweigh what would at worst be minimal harm to the area. In fact, the proposal includes landscaping of the area which have the benefit of hiding the sheds which are currently in view. The Parish Council and many residents that live in close proximity to the site believe that although any impact this may have on the environment within the conservation area should be taken into account, the emphasis should be very much focused on safety and the possible consequences of not addressing this potentially dangerous situation, as some have called it, an accident waiting to happen. In conclusion, I believe the reasons put forward for the refusal of this application are far and away outweighed by the potential danger that is caused by vehicles being forced to park on the road in this area, particularly during school start and finish times, and of course after dark, there is no street lighting in the village. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make you aware of the position taken by the Parish Council regarding this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Peart? No? Thank you very much. If we could have Mr. Theobald, please. Good evening, Mr. Theobald. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here to provide public observations against this application, which come from my own family, owners of properties that adjoin the land in question, and other residents of the parish. The 5 sets of observations are as follows. 1. The case officer has identified an unacceptable domestic encroachment on the land, which is already distracting from the views that should be enjoyed for a number of viewpoints and vistas that the land forms part of, as well as impacting the wider setting of the listed buildings. There is also the potential for the land being used for the parking of vehicles, the storage of equipment related to non-domestic uses. They mentioned the greenery to hide sheds. If that was the case, that would need to be in excess of 3 metres in height. When considering the neighbourhood plan, the application conflicts with multiple clauses that form the environmental factors and design requirements policies. 2. The case officer points out there is no evidence has been submitted to justify the claims by the ward councillor, the parish council and others that on-street parking is a highway safety concern. Freedom of information requests made by the Speaker to Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, Hampshire County Council, Hampshire Constabulary and St Marybourne Parish Council have returned no information relating to parking or road traffic problems in the vicinity of the chapel. At the meeting of the St Marybourne Parish Council last night, Councillor Pert said that on-road parked cars are good for slowing traffic. In 2018, planning permission to convert the chapel and hall to a residential property was approved. The application stated that there is existing convenient nearby parking and identified 4 different existing locations that could be used for parking. The approved permission did not require off-road parking to be provided, and the application officer considered that the proposal is acceptable in terms of its impact on highway safety. When the Parish Council considered the application, they chose to respond with no objection option and just noted under other comments that they had reservations about lack of parking. There was no mention of the potential dangers, and the situation is unlikely to have changed since 2018. A photograph sent to members of the committee on Monday evening illustrates the typical current parking arrangements on Stoke Road. The apparent blind bend may only have come into being when the applicant allowed the occupier to plant tall flora in early 2020. 3. Between the proposed track and the public highway is a strip of land over which the applicant has no control and cannot guarantee access across. This application will increase the vehicle movements in the village end, at the village end of Gangbridge Lane. The land that must be crossed between the track and the lane is already used, and I can provide more detail. The Highways consultative visited on a school holiday period and so viewed the location in an unusual state. 2 photographs sent to members of the committee on Monday evening illustrate the congestion that occurs outside the potential access point on Gangbridge Lane and a greatly restricted visibility display. 4. In the last 2 years, game fish, as well as nesting and breeding wildfowl, have been found close to the bridge, which is a good indication that the rivulet is free of pollution. Runoff and floodwaters with contamination from the track, parking area and amenity space has the potential to pollute the rivulet and groundwater. 5. The threat of flooding is real, and photographs sent to members of the committee on Monday illustrate this. One photograph shows the site as it was 2 summers ago, and the other 2 during a period of flood in February 2014. One of the photographs was taken before the peak of flooding and shows the track underwater, or what would be the track underwater. At least one document submitted by the applicant suggests that parts of the track would be raised above the existing level of the meadow. The raised track will potentially prevent the free runoff of flood waters and other waters that accumulate. Thank you for the consideration of these observations, and I ask you that you support the recommendation of the case officer to refuse the application. Well, finally, I find it surprising that Councillor Faulkner has not excused himself despite calling in the previous version of this application as he supported that application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr Theobald? No? Thank you, Mr Theobald. If we could have Miss Turner. Good evening to you. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Stella Turner, Planning Consultant for the applicants, speaking in support of this application. As outlined, the proposed development comprises the change of use of agricultural land to residential, specifically the creation of private amenity space and much-needed parking for the existing dwelling of the chapel. The chapel was granted planning permission for its conversion into a residential dwelling back in 2018, where the development was approved with no on-site parking provision. Currently, the occupiers of the chapel park on the verge along Stoke Road, which gives rise to a number of highway safety issues due to the limited visibility in both directions. Parking is a major issue within the village, most notably within drop-off and collection times at the adjacent school. The Council, in the report, have outlined 4 proposed reasons for refusal, which I would like to take the opportunity to address in turn. It is important at this stage to note that Hampshire Highways have issued no objections to the proposed development, considering the removal of the on-street parking to represent a benefit in terms of highway safety. They've also confirmed that the proposed access point, orientation of the access and the visibility displays are acceptable. This application also has the continued support from the Parish Council, local ward members and members of the public. Reasons for refusal 1 and 2 are concerned with the impact the proposed development may have upon the surrounding landscape and conservation area. During the course of the previous application in 2020, the landscape team considered the application to be acceptable, subject to the surfacing being permeable. All that has changed now is the removal of the proposed parking spaces for the adjacent cottages and a reduction in the proposed site area. A landscaping scheme has been submitted which outlines the proposed hard and soft landscaping and vegetation planting to soften and screen the site. The site is located within a village where it is not unusual to see residential garden space, car parking and relevant garden paraphernalia. As no additional buildings or structures are being proposed, coupled with the proposed landscaping, it is considered that there will be no views lost and no harm caused to the surrounding conservation area. Reason 3 outlines the proximity of the proposed development to the Bourne rivulet and the impacts this would have on the biodiversity network. As confirmed within the committee report pack, the EA anticipates that the risks could be satisfactorily managed and advised that the applicant apply for an environmental permit to address this. The Council's biodiversity officer raised concerns that the application site falls within the required 20-metre buffer. The applicant commissioned an ecological appraisal to review the site, which confirmed that any habitats that would be lost during the development are small in area, common and easy to replace, and that a construction environmental management plan can be submitted to ensure that the contractor implements specific pollution and silt preservation measures to avoid any direct or indirect impacts to the Bourne rivulet. I wish to note that the access to the site and associated gate already exist within the 20-metre zone, and access is achievable for tractors and various farmyard vehicles associated with the existing agricultural use. Also, within this 20-metre zone is the existing garden and parking spaces of neighbouring dwelling Ricketts Way, and therefore this rule should not be slavishly applied. Finally, reason 4 discusses the site's location within flood zone 3. The site is specifically located with flood zone 3B, which is the functional floodplain. The EA previously advised that the proposed works could be classed as water compatible and raised no objections, subject to conditions which the applicants agreed to. This time round, the EA have advised that an environmental permit would be required, which the applicants are committed to obtaining. The proposed surface is to be of permeable construction to avoid any further risks of flooding. I'd like to conclude by summarising that this proposed development would allow sufficient parking provision and private amenity space to be created with a pragmatic and sensible scheme proposed which wholly addresses highway safety issues, specifically in relation to the adjacent school. Outstanding matters can sufficiently be dealt with via planning conditions. We respectfully request that the committee approve this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for the Speaker? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one. We've got if we could put the slide up that says front of Methodist Chapel, please. Oop, no, there you are, that one. So the white building is the front of the chapel. Those two vehicles, which property are they associated with, please?
These vehicles are associated with the chapel. However, the car parking, as you can see at the moment, is unauthorised because it was created, we understand it was created for the conversion of the chapel. So that was for the contractors' vehicles to park. And to accommodate the vehicles, you see deeper within the photograph, you can see a brick boundary wall. So that boundary wall was actually extending across the frontage of the chapel. There was only a little gap, pedestrian access from the highway onto the site. So officers, the part of the recommendation is to refuse and enforce, and the enforcement include the reinstatement of that brick boundary wall. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up, so if we were to approve this tonight, could we condition that no sheds or garages or all the things that you could normally put up in your private amenity space, could we condition it that they can't be put up? So effectively remove permitted development rights from that area. Yeah, we can.
So you could take away permitted development rights for ancillary garden buildings, which apply in this location. Bearing in mind it's more restricted anyway because it's a conservation area in the A and B. So, excuse me, the amount of what you can put on there is much greater reduced, but you can remove those permitted developments.
Okay.
All it means then is the applicant would then be required to apply for anything in the future.
Okay. Thank you for that. If there are no more questions, debate. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to comment on Mr. Theobald's comment about me on this committee. I've expressed no opinion on this application and had no involvement with it whatsoever. although I'm a councillor for Evingar, Councillor Carr handles St Mary Bourne, so I do not have a predetermined view, and therefore I'm sat here as any of my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner. Back to debate. If nobody's sticking their hands up, I'll start it off. It's a real toss-up between road safety and the fact that the existing parking arrangement is unlawful and possibly going to be that's going to be lost in an enforcement case. And then the visual amenity of the rural area. And I look at the plan on page 283, and I look at the amount of land that is being effectively having a change of use. And I look at the size of 2 car parking spaces, and the amount of land is enough to park about 30 cars. So I think I am coming down in favour of the officer's recommendation to refuse, that because the bit of land to the sort of bottom left of that diagram, well, why do the cars need to be taken that far into that site? They could be parked immediately behind the chapel. It just doesn't need this amount of space. I think they're taking far too much space to achieve. I totally understand what they want to achieve. I totally understand the need to achieve it. But they're taking an awful lot more than they need. So I am going to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Court. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak on it? No? Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, Chair. Obviously, perhaps it's been too hot today for me, but can I just clarify that they have 2 parking spaces at the front of this property, but they illegally did it by doing it in construction. So what is our beef with the fact that they're there and could solve some of this problem?
The 2 parking spaces at the front, so there used to be a boundary wall that went directly along the front there, and there was a small pedestrian gate, and there's a Methodist chapel that there was no parking at all. So when the change of use for residential was approved, on the basis of a residential use wouldn't require as much parking if you applied it to the chapel. That's why we accepted that situation there. I believe during the conversion, the wall was taken out so that construction vehicles could get off the road and carry out the conversion, but it is now carried on as a domestic parking area. But that doesn't have permission. The issue with that as well is in terms of visibility space, and it's very close to the bend. I mean, if you look to the right, then potentially it's not safe, but the county haven't commented on that access because that's not before you for tonight.
It's been moved and seconded for refusal. The reasons given by the officers. Those in favour of refusal? And enforcement. Okay. Do we do that separately? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll make that 11. 12. And those against refusal? None. Thank you. And we come back now to the issue of enforcement, because it has started. So no, we will do that. We can do that separately. I move that we give them 3 months to comply. Does that sound sense?
Sorry, Chair. The recommendation on page 260 from officers is a period of compliance of 4 months.
Okay, fine.
And also the steps required to be taken are in that paper as well on page 260. We have reinstatement of land, but we've made reference to the reinstatement of the boundary wall along the front. So that would form part of the recommendation.
Recommended
for enforcement. So,
okay.
So it would be on page 260, the enforcement action is removal of the fence, removal of gravel hard standing, the reinstatement of land to previous condition, and we would just like to strengthen that by including, being more precise, the retention, the reinstatement of the boundary wall, the section that we've seen on the photo, with a 4-month compliance period.
Okay. Okay. So, sorry? So I move from the chair, recommendation B on page 260 in terms of enforcement. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Frost. Those in favour of enforcement as described by Lisa? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And those against? 1, 2. 2. Thank you. If you could confirm that.
Thank you, Chairman. So it is refused and enforced, and the enforcement action will include the removal of the fence, the gravel hard standing, and reinstatement of the land to previous condition, including reinstatement of the brick wall at front. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8. Land adjacent to Woolton Hill Sports Club, Woolton Hill, Newbury. Councillor Faulkner.
I shall be speaking as ward councillor, so I shall depart.
Thank you for that. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for permission in principle for the erection of up to 3 dwellings. If I can draw your attention to the update paper and the viewing panel report. Also, with regards to affordable housing, due to the site area, affordable housing is required, therefore informative 5 is therefore amended to include that, and the text is there. And also there's reference to the NPPF. It should refer to the July 2021 version and not the February version. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. So if we could ask first speaker, which is East Woody Parish Council, Mr. Haynes. And good evening, Mr. Haynes. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and you've already found the microphone button.
Good evening. My name is Martin Haynes, and I'm representing the East Woody Parish Council, who are objecting to this PIP. We're here to consider the principle of allowing 3 houses to be built on this land. Details regarding design of buildings are not for today's meeting, but we cannot review this principle without considering the effect on several important issues. Firstly, access to the site. Whilst the government PIP guidelines state that it is not necessary to discuss means of access at this stage, we believe that it is a fundamental issue to this PIP. On the same side of the road as the planned entrance, there is a dangerous exit from the sports club. Parents will not allow their children to walk along the road to the club. Yet this application shows the proposed entrance to the development positioned 45 metres closer to a blind bend. The Parish Council have invested time and money into assessing speed and traffic figures in the parish in the last 18 months, and we conclude that this position on Woolton Hill Road is simply dangerous and an inappropriate location below a blind bend on the brow of a hill. Secondly, impact on the hedgerows to improve the visibility display. To achieve the minimum visibility display required, 90 metres of hedgerow will be removed and several mature trees felled. And the requirement for a minimum visibility of 43 metres is flawed. In dry conditions, a car travelling at 30 mph would take 23 metres to stop, but in the wet, it would need 46 metres. Vans and lorries take 50% longer to stop, therefore up to 69 to 70 metres. However, since 1 in 3 vehicles are exceeding the 30-mile-an-hour limit at this point, these stopping distances, while still insufficient, are academic. Thirdly, impact on the AONB. This is agricultural land and lies within the AONB. Further building is not acceptable. The site is outside the settlement policy boundary. It's an invasion of the countryside, and there is no proven need for this type of housing. This parish has already exceeded its housing target, delivering more homes than required, and is confirmed by the BDBC. 4, impact on the sports club and drainage. Next to this site is a thriving and growing sports club. We should consider the impact of a development here, noting that BDBC have a policy of encouraging community facilities and not allowing development which will have an adverse effect on such a facility. Drainage is also a key issue in this area, which our ward councillor will cover in more detail, together with the major financial investment made by BDBC in supporting this important community asset. I would conclude by saying that whilst the BDBC local plan is out of date and the Borough Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply, it is not acceptable that this land within the AONB and outside the SPB should be considered for development. 66% of dwellings within the parish are of this type, large 4-bedroom homes. Therefore, the development will not address the council's housing shortfall or the government's objective of boosting the supply of affordable new homes. The use of a car is essential given the lack of public transport options in the village, and the fact is that the development is located on a blind bend on a hill with no pavements or street lighting and a proven record of speeding. This is not a location with opportunities for travel other than by private car. We therefore respectfully ask the committee to refuse the application. Is it the same?
Yeah, that's it. Questions from Mr. Hange? No? Thank you very much. And if we could have Mr. Johns, please. Sorry. Sorry. Sorry, I've crossed lines here. Could we have Hilary Hange, please? My apologies. Good evening. You have 4 minutes, and I will warn you when you have 1 minute remaining, and the microphone button is in front of you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here today representing a group of residents who live in Walton Hill, and we object to this PIP application. I hope you will bear with me as we take a glimpse into the future. Hi. Yeah, we're new here. We live on the new development. It's just above the tennis club. We love the house. Unfortunately, we do have major issues with the road. We had no idea just how fast traffic came down that hill since the developers cut back the bend at the top, and it doesn't help that our exit is so far up the hill. We thought we were coming to a village where we could leave the car at home, but actually we can't leave the house without it. And did you know, 20 or so years ago, a young girl lost her life on this bit of road. I'd never let my daughters walk up to the village. I have to drive one to catch the school bus from Trade Street round the corner. Half an hour later, I'm in the car again, taking the youngest to junior school. And there are just 2 bus services a day. Even if we could walk to the doctors, there'd be no point, as the surgery's at capacity. To top it all, there's the tennis club. From mid-afternoon to early evening, we have constant noise of junior coaching. Then the adults play, more noise, and joy of joys, very bright floodlights until late. Talk about light pollution. It's just so disappointing. So, as we've heard, and as we know, sustainability is important. The applicant states the development is in a sustainable location, resulting in no adverse impacts on the character of the area, AONB, highways, drainage, amenity, trees, and biodiversity. NPPF states that for sustainable development in rural areas, housing locations should enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities. Walton Hill infrastructure is stretched. We know this. And to live here, new residents will have to use a car. So this development will be in an AONB, outside the SPB on agricultural land. The building of houses here is contrary to stated policy of the NPPF, AONB and Basingstoke and Dean. As the BDBC's Natural Environment Landscape team originally claimed, it will have a harmful impact on the landscape. Excess speeding of cars has been proven and already raised by the parish council. Now, the original application proposed an exit onto this dangerous road, which highways did not accept. Alternative exit plans were then presented with no significant safety improvement, yet requiring the destruction of some 90 metres of substantial hedgerow and mature trees in order to widen the road and decrease the angle of the dangerous bend. Highways then accepted this revision. The developer's application states that biodiversity will be preserved and enhanced, that they seek to retain existing trees, and that there will be no adverse impact on existing trees. But they are proposing to destroy 90 metres of hedgerow and trees. Thank you. Perhaps not so concerned with biodiversity. There is no streetlight and there are no pavements, but the provision of either will create further urbanisation and loss of visual amenity, unacceptable in an AONB. The proximity of the thriving tennis club will have a negative impact on nearby houses, and residential objections could jeopardise the ongoing success of this club. Furthermore, there's no need for more housing in our village. This parish has more than fulfilled its housing quota at this time. Despite this, the need for housing in the parish is not ignored. In the last 15 months, the parish council have approved so-called windfall applications for 21 new houses. Government institutions at national, county and local levels have many long-established guidelines to protect rural life. Okay, thank you. Can I just do one last sentence? Thank you. Decisions here have lasting impact for future generations who choose to live in these villages. This does not have to be part of a gradual, non-reversible erosion of precious and valued countryside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. And if we could have Mr. Johns, please. Good evening, Mr. Johns. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Gav Johns and I'm the planning consultant from Provision on behalf of the applicant. The site is acknowledged by your officers as a suitable location for new homes in Wootton Hill. Your officers' report provides a well-balanced assessment of the application and addresses the concerns raised by local residents and the parish council. Tonight I wish to pick up a few points and explain why permission in principle should be granted. As you'll be aware, the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Accordingly, the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies, and there is a need to approve applications for new homes across the borough. Indeed, an inspector in 2020 allowed a similar PIP application at Hollington Lane in Wootton Hill, and this is referred to in the officer's report. This is a very similar development in comparable circumstances. Indeed, the site before you is closer to the centre of the village and its amenities and services, including the primary school and access to public transport. Likewise, the site lies in the North Wessex Downs area of outstanding natural beauty. However, in this case, it lies immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. Further, the site is akin to an infill development, being situated between existing residential dwellings along Trade Street and the sports club. The density of the development also responds to the site's character and relationship with the adjacent built form and countryside. The site is well screened by existing vegetation. Moreover, there is ample space within the site to deliver considerable additional soft landscaping and tree planting at the TDC stage. The council's landscape officer has confirmed that they have no objection to the proposal. The Highway Authority has also confirmed they have no objection to the proposed development on this site. The details of the access and visibility displays are a matter for the TDC stage. However, there is an existing site access in active use, and through liaison with the authority, we provided extra indicative information demonstrating that alternative accesses could be achieved along the site frontage to assist at this stage. The Highways authorities are satisfied that, in principle, a safe access for the site can be achieved, with further details required at the TDC stage. A few local residents have raised concerns regarding the potential impact on future occupiers due to the proximity of the sports club and its floodlights. The Environmental Health Officer has raised no objection and noted this can be designed through the TDC stage. There are no tree protection orders on or within proximity of the site which would affect the development. A tree survey will be provided at the TDC stage, and the development will seek to retain existing important trees where possible and provide significant new soft landscaping and planting. In summary, the proposed development is a sustainable development and will give rise to a range of benefits. The site will make a modest contribution to the Council's 5-year land supply and can be built out relatively quickly. The scheme will also provide some economic benefits through employment at the construction phase. The occupation of the 3 new homes will also contribute towards the viability of local services and support the vitality of the local community. We therefore hope that members will see the overall benefits of the scheme, where the principle of residential development on this site is considered to be acceptable. There are no technical in principle objections, and matters such as access, design and ecology will be further addressed at the TDC stage. We therefore respectfully request that members accept your officer's recommendation and resolve to grant permission in principle. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Mr Johns? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr Johns. Just a brief question, really, and I appreciate this is a PIP and there are all sorts of things. We've got your illustrative plan here, which I know we don't hold you to, but interestingly, you show the existing access as the entry of the site, but then you've done these two, option 1 and option 2. The reason being you were asked to by the Highways Authority because they weren't happy with the existing access?
So yes, so our preference obviously to use the existing access, and we have provided visibility displays to the Highways Authority, and generally they were happy with that, but they wanted further detail, which it was not actually required at this until the TDC stage. So to assist them in giving them confidence that an access could be achieved along the frontage, we provided additional information.
Any more questions? No? Thank you, Mr Johns. Councillor Falconer. You have 4 minutes. I'll warn you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think, as you know, I'm the ward councillor, one of the 3, and also I'm a trustee of and past chairman of the Walton Hill Sports Club, which is directly impacted by this application. Now, the reason for approval is flawed. The planning officer for the North Wessex Down AONB has very recently stated that the absence of a 5-year land supply does not apply to the AONB unless, as the NPPF states, there are exceptional circumstances. But in this case, I would submit there are no exceptional circumstances. In the update of our council's local plan, the East Woody Parish Council has had a letter from our policy team to say that it will have 0 housing target because of the number it has already built in the last 5 years, and also reference to the local need. Now, furthermore, the location is outside of the settlement policy boundary. So you add that to the AONB, and I would submit that's not good. It is an unwarranted linear extension into the countryside. It's not an infill development. And it's an urbanisation of the road from Walton Hill to Ball Hill. The location is a direct threat to the Walton Hill Sports Club, which has been there for 75 years. And as you've heard, the location is also next to a dangerous road, heavily used by the 3 schools and nowadays, of course, the delivery drivers. Now, as a trustee of the sports club, I have huge concerns. The NPPF states that a development should not be approved if it poses a detrimental effect on an existing sports facility. Now, 2 days before our DC site visit, £30,000 worth of works were completed in the road and in the grounds for the sewage and drainage works. And this was funded by S106 and LIFT funding of ours. And there is a further £10,000 for upgrade to the training court, which is mainly used by the younger members of the club. And incidentally, there's 330 users of the club. And of course, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, further lift funding, I think it was £10,000, was given to upgrade the 40-year-old floodlights to low-level LED lights on all 3 courts. And you've heard tonight what can happen when there's a conflict between floodlights and residents. Now, this location is a steep slope, and a runoff down to the stream at the bottom is an issue. The squash court was closed when I was chairman because we could never solve the drainage problem as water seeped over the foundations and rotted the floor. But it's now used for table tennis, which doesn't require the same quality. The recent drainage works will hopefully improve this. But a development on that very steep hill would reduce the soakaway, worsen the drainage problem, and threaten the considerable investment that has already been made in the club. I would submit this location is inappropriate. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Questions for Councillor Falconer? No? Thank you very much. Questions to officers? Councillor Tomlin.
Could we clarify that comment made by Councillor Faulkner about the area of outstanding natural beauty in the 5-year land supply? Please.
Councillor Faulconer, I'm afraid you're required to leave the room for the rest of this discussion. No, leave the room. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Faulkner was referring to paragraph 11D of the MPPF, and in particular the footnote under D1 at footnote 7, which refers to protected areas, and that includes AOMBs. But what that point 1, D1 says that where there is a clear reason for refusing the development. Now, as officers, our advice to you that there isn't, for the very reasons we've balanced out in the report. But I think that's the point that Councillor Faulkner was making, that he has a different view in how to interpret that point.
Any more questions for officers? Debate? I don't like PIPs. I don't think any of us do, or the resultant TDCs. But all we are looking at is, could 3 houses be fitted into this piece of ground? The access isn't something we're able to consider. The removal or possible removal of the hedge isn't something we're able to consider. That would come in on biodiversity issues, on a technical detail, on the TDC. The houses that are shown, they look fairly substantial houses, but they're illustrative only. We don't know right now whether they're building 3-bedroom houses, 4-bedroom houses, or 2-bedroom houses. So, yeah, I'd be interested to hear what other people say. Councillor Freeman.
I'm not comfortable with it at all. It's right out in the middle of nowhere. We've already heard there's barely any public transport. The people here will need to use cars, and we're supposed to be promoting more public transport and less developments right in the middle of nowhere. I'm not happy with this at all. I don't think that we should be building houses this far, especially when it's not when it will threaten existing establishments that we've already funded and have been there for a mighty long time.
Councillor Tomlin.
Yeah, I've got concerns here. I mean, we're supposed to be looking at the suitability of the site for residential. Now, access is the detail. We're not going to look at the detail of the access, but I believe we should look at the principle of the access. And this access is on a very dangerous stretch of road. And we've heard, obviously, there was a fatality in the past, and from the site visit, it was a particularly nasty stretch of road you would not want to walk on. And then I note comments from our waste officers, right, yeah, no problem, providing they put their bins out on the curb. So, we're urbanising this in an area where it's not suitable. So I have grave reservations about this. And of course, what is the whole big issue with this is we don't have the highways people to come along and say it's not a problem, whatever. We haven't had any work done because that comes at TDC stage, which is completely bizarre given the fact that we can see that there are big issues that we need to resolve before we even think it's got the principle right. So I'm not happy with this at all. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Howard Sorrell.
Thank you, Chair. We've been told that the only question we need to consider is whether 3 houses can fit on this site. If that's an entirely accurate summary of the only thing we need to consider, then clearly 3 houses can. I think we're going to have to approve it if that's the only consideration. But like others have said, there is clearly going to be an impact and risks associated with any development here. So I'm happy to move for approval if that is the only consideration, but I would like just some clarity if there is any way we can consider other factors at this point.
Yeah, so the PIP process, and it is set out in the report, you can only consider land use, amount and location. So there are kind of 3 elements, but essentially what Councillor Robertson said.
Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. Please forgive my ignorance on this, I'm just not at all sure. So, but if we approve the PIP as big enough for the houses, which it clearly is, are we going to find ourselves in the situation in future where we have our hands tied again because it's been approved in principle? So this is basically a way of getting approval kind of by the back door. Yeah.
Yes, that is exactly. It's not by the back door. It was brought in as a shortcut. As I've said, I don't like it, and yes, it does tie our hands. If we approve this tonight, go on, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, clearly you're looking at the three points that I just referred to: land use, location, and amount. At this in principle stage, you would look at all the details under the TDC, and you would have an opportunity to consider impacts such as, impact on the landscape, biodiversity, the highways. You could consider all of those at the TDC stage. It's only you only get a planning permission by the PIP plus the TDC, which then gives you the permission, but you can consider all those matters of detail at that TDC stage. So you may reach a different decision when you have all of that information before you.
I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Hussey. Councillor Howard Sorrell, did you propose that for, except I know you were sort of talking about it, I'm not quite sure exactly where we finished up.
I'm happy to propose it for approval, yeah.
Is there a seconder for that? Okay, well, okay, we have got to make a decision on it one way or another, so I will second it, so at least we get to the vote. Councillor Hussey.
Although we're not meant to consider it, I want to consider the access. If we can't find a suitable access by agreeing to the PIP and the recommendation of the officers, then we are saying it doesn't matter that there's not a suitable access. It's illogical. We might have our hands tied, but it's illogical. It's like saying, don't go around, you can go around the corner there and you can run round, it's blind, you don't know if any cars are coming. But it's a nonsense. We're committing to something if we approve it and going into uncertainty. And where we can't move backwards. It's too late. We have had exactly this with the mentioned surgery, where we refused the TDC on access. And it's a rock and a hard place. Councillor Harvey.
I just completely agree. And we all know what's going to happen. Hampshire County Council are going to sit in the Winchester Castle and make a decision based on a desktop study that's got nothing to do with the reality that's in front of us. And they're going to give permission for this because they don't see the highways issues in the same way that we do. So we know exactly what the applicant's going to be able to get away with. And in the context of this, isn't it fascinating? I've got to congratulate the applicant, actually. I really have got to congratulate them because the land ownership clearly shows us a broader field over which we have absolutely no right to discuss this evening because it's not part of the red line, but they've left the access wide open to the field at the back, and you guarantee we'll give Pip for 3, and we'll have another 3 that come along in a short space of time. So you can read the scripts on this a mile off, and I just think that's shocking. But that's the nature of the planning system we've got at the moment, and our hands are tied. I really feel, as many other members have expressed this evening, to be honest, and it's just shocking.
Sue wants to come in with some advice, and then we'll go to the vote on it.
With all due respect to Councillor Harvey, his perception of what might happen in the future shouldn't affect how you consider the application tonight. I would just draw that to your attention. As Lisa has said, you need a PIP and a TDC to have a proper planning permission. You have the right at the TDC stage, when you have all of the technical information in front of you, where you can assess whether you consider it to be a safe access, whether the amount of hedgerow that has been lost is unacceptable because it changes the impact of the area. That's not for you to consider it tonight. And I can understand Councillor Hussey's frustration. Unfortunately, this is how PIPs work. So what's before you tonight, you have to almost like park the access issue because it's not for consideration tonight. You have all the powers at the TDC stage to refuse it if you consider the access is unacceptable, whether it be for highway grounds, for impact on the character or biodiversity, and it's at that point that you have to consider it then, not now.
We'll take Councillor Freeman, followed by Councillor Tomlin, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thanks. The trouble with that argument is once these people have permission in principle, then surely it generally follows on, and that will be having to be given weight. At the end, I still think we can challenge this. I don't think it should be approved on the grounds that the location isn't suitable. So I won't be voting for this motion. But I'd say it's, you know, we need to be considering, let's say, if you've got planning permission in principle, then that's added weight when it comes to technical details. And then we end up in a situation where they've got technical permission and our hands are tied with refusing it because they've already got the permission in principle. And it's...
Nick did just point to an example where that wasn't the case, though.
Councillor Howard Sorrell, one conversation, please, and it's Councillor Tomlin's turn right now.
Thank you, Chair. Well, no, again, this is down to interpretation. The word is suitable in principle for residential development. And if you can't get into the site and you're going to destroy the hedgerow, it's not suitable, in my opinion, whether that's shared by other members. But we have the power to make that decision now, as well as at the TDC stage. So I still think that we are able to discuss the accessibility, shall we say, not the access. Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan, and then we are going to the vote. There will be no more speaking.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it is about the suitability. Let's just be honest. Without proper access, it's not suitable. And I think it falls on that. You know, the land use, the number are on it. Yeah, well, you could fit them if it was a suitable site, but that is not the case, and that hasn't been proven tonight. And I'm afraid that the arguments for and against PIPs we all understand. I can't bring myself to vote with the recommendation.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour? 2. Those against? I'll take that as being 11. Yeah, 11. Okay, so we now need a new motion because that motion has failed. Councillor Freeman.
Okay, I'd like to propose to refuse this application on the grounds that the location is not suitable for development. Just as the location, we said we can refuse the planning permission on the fact the location is not suitable.
Outside the boundaries, stated boundary as well.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Howard, please, could you not have separate conversations?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm afraid we will need more precise reason than just saying it's not suitable for development. I mean, clearly the applicant needs to be very clear on what your reasons are. They will have a right of appeal against any refusal, and you know, you do need to be very clear on the reasons why having listened to the advice that Sue and I have given you on what matters you can consider at this stage.
Okay, I personally, I don't think it's suitable because of the lack of public transport, just the whole inaccessibility, and the fact that we're supposed to be promoting developments which don't need car use, and this one is quite clearly goes against that.
So in essence, I think Councillor Freeman is saying that the location is not suitable because it's in an unsustainable location.
Thank you very much. That's the word I was looking for.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Tomlin, thank you. Right, been moved and seconded for refusal. Those in favour? I'll take that, it's 11. And those against? And I will abstain. Thank you. There we go. Could you confirm?
Thank you, Chair. If I can confirm that the application is refused on the basis of the location of the site is not in a sustainable location.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to do the vote, aren't we? Because we're going to go over 9:30. We've got one more to go. Yeah.
One more to go, it's on the last page.
Have that? No, we didn't. Right. Yeah. Could I have your attention for a second, please? It's nearly 9:30. Is everybody happy to continue for... We've got one more to do. So is everybody happy to continue with the meeting? I should think we'll be done by 10 o'clock. Good, thank you. In that case, item number 9, 1 Cobbitts View, Berkeley. And Sue.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the conversion of the loft at number 1 Cobbitts View. I just bring to your attention that the scheme since submitted has been amended and it no longer includes the Juliet balcony, which was in the rear gable elevation. There's no update and the officer's recommendation is for approval.
And we have no speakers, which is good. So, questions to officers? No? In that case, debate. It's sort of recommended for approval, isn't it? If there's no debate, I will move approval from the chair and seconded by Councillor Harvey. Those in favour? And, yeah, and those against? And
Sorry, can we do that again? Can we do that again? Yeah, everybody was...
right. Moved and seconded for approval. Those in favour of approval? That's it. Everybody, thank you. I know it's late. Right, could you confirm, please? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair, that the application be approved subject to the conditions on the officer's report.
That's it. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a horribly messy evening, and but thank you all, and thank you very much to the officers for their patience.